Let's talk about some advanced topics for layers. So we all know what a layer is. We can rename it by slow double clicking, and we can have multiple layers stacked up on top of each other and change its opacity to reveal the layers underneath. But did you know if we have a layer selected along with our move tool and we just hit the number 4 on our keyboard, that will change the layer's opacity to 40%. If I hit 9, that'll change it to 90%. And if I hit two numbers in quick succession, such as 3 and 6, that'll change the opacity to 36. Another really quick way to do this is simply by hovering over the opacity text and left clicking and going left to right. And as you can see, that will change its opacity. Now, if I want to do that even faster, I can do that while holding Shift. And as you can see, that will go in increments of 10% and will go really, really quickly. And on the other hand, I can do that while holding Alt, and that will do it really, really slowly. If I hold down Alt and just select the layer, that will zoom in and show me exactly what's on that layer. So if I have something a bit smaller and I press Alt and hit that layer again, it will zoom up right into everything that is visible on that layer. This also works with masks and adjustment layers, except when you press Alt on your layer mask, it will show you your layer mask in an isolated fashion like so. But wait a minute, you might be wondering, what is a layer mask? A mask simply reveals and hides certain parts of your layer. It's really no different from taking your eraser tool and erasing part of your layer, except using a mask lets you work in a way that's non-destructive, as in your changes are not permanent. I'll show you this quickly with two opaque layers. To create a mask, first select the top layer and come down to this icon right here that looks like a circle in a rectangle. Just press that and you will apply a layer mask. You'll get this white box on the same layer right next to it. This is your mask. Make sure you select it by left clicking on it, and it can be edited by using your brush tool. So go ahead, come over to your toolbar and select your brush tool, and you're going to want to make sure that your foreground color right here is set to black. And when you go to paint on your layer, you'll see right away that it's acting just like the eraser tool. But if I change my color to white and start to paint back over, you'll see that that layer starts to come back. And remember, if I press Alt on my layer mask, it will show that layer mask in full. And when I go ahead and paint in black, and if I press Alt again on my layer mask, it will show me my project once again. Now, if I only want a little bit to show through, I can change my color to a gray, and that will show just a little bit. Another easy way to do this is if I just set this back to black, and what I can do is change the brush opacity, and that will work in the same way. And if I look at my mask, this is what it looks like. And of course, if I want to get rid of that mask, I just have to make sure it's selected and hit delete on my keyboard. Moving on, let's take a look at some useful shortcuts. If I want to duplicate a layer, all I have to do is press Control or Command J on my keyboard, and that will duplicate a layer. And I can actually do that quicker by having my move tool selected and selecting the layer. By holding down Alt, left clicking and dragging, that will duplicate the layer just like so. For as long as the Alt key or Option key is held down, you can make as many copies as you'd like. Now you can see we have 5 copies of that layer. Now I can also use this shortcut with selections. So let's say you select something like this tree, make sure your move tool is selected and make sure the correct layer is selected. And if I hold down Alt and click and drag, that will make a copy just like that, but it will be on the same layer. So if I want it on a separate layer, all I have to do is press Control or Command J, and that will make a separate layer with the selection that I made. If I want to merge a layer so everything is all together on a layer, all I have to do is select the top layer, press Control or Command E, and that will merge down to the layer underneath it, making it all into one layer. You can also group layers by selecting one or more layers and pressing Control or Command G, and that will make a grouped folder sort of like this that I can open and close, and you'll see all the layers right there. Grouping layers is not only a great way to stay organized, but it's also a great way to select and edit layers all together. For example, if I select this group right here, make sure auto select is turned off, and while I have my move tool selected, I can move all those layers all together as a group. I can change its size with Control or Command T, and that will size them all together as a group. And I can also change the opacity of the group. So if I change that down, it will change all the layers to whatever I set the opacity of the group to. Take a look at how the group's opacity is at 61%. And if I select a layer in that group, you'll see that it's still at 100%, even though they are all transparent. As soon as I drag a layer out of that group, you can see it becomes fully opaque. So any effect you apply to the group will affect everything in the group. So just remember, Control G makes a group, Control E will merge layers, and Control J duplicates a layer or group. Same with holding Alt or Option and clicking and dragging. If there's any shortcuts to remember, just remember these three, as you'll probably be using them the most. So whenever you bring in a new document into Photoshop, you'll notice that a background layer gets created that is locked. The background layer is simply there to prevent transparency. It's to act as the background. It cannot be edited unless you convert it to a normal layer. And all you have to do is come over here to your layers and hit this lock icon, and that will convert it to a normal layer that can now be edited. Okay, let's talk about layer styles. So right here, I have two different layers. I have a text layer on top of a background, just like so. I'm gonna make sure that my text layer is selected like so, and I'm gonna come down here to where this button says FX, which is short for effects. Now, when I click that, I'll get some options here. And for now, let's just select stroke. As soon as I do that, this menu will pop up and you'll see that our text now has an outline. So stroke is just an easy way of adding an outline. And because this is being applied to the entire layer, it'll try to add an outline to whatever is non-transparent on that layer. And just in case you didn't know, if I hide my background layer, whenever you see this gray and white grid like so, that is indicating transparency. And if I zoom in, you can see that there are no pixels and it won't show up when we export. So back in the effects menu, we can change the size right here, and you can see that changes in real time. We can change the position of it, and we can even change the opacity and the color right here. This menu makes it easy to add different effects and looks to your layer. Another fun effect is drop shadow, and all we have to do is come down here to where it says drop shadow and select the text. And as you can see, a drop shadow will be applied to my text, nice and easy. And of course, all the options to change how your drop shadow looks can be found right here. Keep going through the rest of these effects and see what they do. And when you're done, just press OK. And you'll now see that that layer has all those effects listed right here. And I can toggle these effects on and off with this eye icon right here. And you can see how that's disappearing and reappearing. And I can also collapse and expand those effects with this arrow right here. If I ever need to go back and edit an effect, I can do so by simply double clicking on the effect like so. And that will then bring up the effects menu where I can edit it once again. This is a great way to work because it's non-destructive. In other words, the changes are not permanent. I can always go back to my effects, turn them on and off, and make changes when I need to. Now this also works in groups, so what I'm going to do is hold down Alt with my text layer selected, and I'm just going to drag to make a duplication, and then I'm going to select both those layers, hit Control or Command G to make a group, and then I can go down to the effects panel and we can give that another effect. And as you can see, the effects just start to stack up on top of one another. And we can start to get double effects. So you can see now I have a stroke and a drop shadow. And if I hit OK and open that group, you can see that those effects are applied to those effects. I want to emphasize that these effects only apply to opaqueness or non-transparent pixels. So here I have a completely transparent layer with a few different effects already applied to it. And if I just start painting with my brush tool, I'm just using a normal round brush, you'll see that those effects are coming in, being applied in real time as I make that brush stroke. And you can see the effects if I just toggle them off like that. You can see it's just a normal stroke just like that. And you can see those effects just like that. Pretty cool, right? I use layer styles all the time, and it is an incredibly powerful and easy tool to use in Photoshop. Okay, let's quickly take a look at blending modes. When I have a layer or group selected, I can come over here to this box that says normal. And if I click that, you'll see I get a whole bunch of different options. And if I just start hovering over them, you'll see we are already getting some pretty drastic changes. This is meant as a way to blend your layers together. Essentially, each option runs a different mathematical calculation to determine how it blends into the layer underneath it. I'm not going to explain how each one works because the best thing to do is actually go through all of them and find the best one for your project. And the best way to do that is actually by coming over here and selecting normal. And then once you see this blue outline around this box, you can then use the up and down arrows to go through each and every blending mode. If you want a more in-depth explanation on blending modes, I have a short video all about that right here. Okay, let's talk about different types of layers. So there's actually only 5 different types or kinds of layers: pixel layers, adjustment layers, type layers, shape layers, and smart objects. You can think of a pixel layer as your default kind of layer. This is the most common layer and you'll probably be using it for all of your projects. And it's any layer that has pixels, which is the small building block used to make up a larger image, and it can be edited in any way. It's important to note that when you scale down a layer like so, and lock it in by pressing enter or just hitting this check mark, and then by pressing Ctrl or Command T, we can make that larger. And when we do that, lock it in, you'll see that we lost a lot of quality. This is because there's only so many pixels it can scale down into, and when you try to scale it back up, you won't be able to get that quality. But of course, if we want that quality back, all we need to do is press Ctrl Z a few times and we have that back the way we had it. Next is adjustment layers. Now, if you don't see your adjustments tab right here, what you can do is go up to Window and find adjustments right here. Now, if I just click on any of these icons here, it will add an adjustment layer, and you will have the option in your properties tab to make some adjustments like so. And this is simply just meant as a way to adjust your image using layers. And you'll see that this adjustment layer looks just like a mask, and that's exactly what it is. By selecting the mask and painting in black, you can see that that adjustment layer starts to disappear when I paint in black. And because all I did was increase some contrast and brightness, it's just going to show me what it looked like before I added that contrast and brightness. Now, it's important to understand that the order matters just like any other layer. So if you want it to affect all of your layers, you're going to want this to be on top. And if I put that below the oak tree layer, you'll see that the effect disappears. The next kind of layer is the type layer. And a type layer gets created whenever I select my type tool and make some text. I'm just going to bring that on top and make that a little bit bigger. And you can see that the text layer looks something like this. Now, what makes this different from a pixel layer is that a type layer does not use pixels, which is something we would label as vector. So if I zoom into this text, you will see pixels, except they're not really there. Let me explain. Photoshop is a raster-based program. And raster simply means anything that uses pixels to make up an image. The other way to create images is through the use of vector, which do not use pixels. Instead, different mathematical calculations are used to make up an image and will keep everything clean and consistent no matter how big or small it is. This is why some people choose to use Adobe Illustrator, which is a vector-based program, and there are different pros and cons to each of them. Now, since the type layer is a vector and Photoshop is a raster-based program, you have to think of this as a vector layer on a raster canvas. So no matter how big or small I make this text, it will always give me clean and consistent lines. And you can see that I just made it really small and really big, and you can see the lines are completely sharp, clean, and consistent. And since it's on a raster canvas, it only can get as small as there are pixels, as you can see right here. So if I make that big again, you can see that the quality retains, unlike the pixel layer, and you can see those nice clean lines. Don't worry about it too much, just know that you can scale these layers up and down with no quality loss. And this leads me to shape layers, which really isn't too much different from type layers. Shape layers get created when you come over to your shape tool, which can be found right here, where you can do a whole bunch of different shapes. And if I go ahead and make a shape like so, that will create a shape layer, which looks something like this. So just like the type layer, this is also a vector. I can scale it with zero quality loss, and I can also add things like an outline by coming over to my properties tab and selecting a color under stroke. Remember, that means outline. And let's just set it to white so we can see it. And then I'm going to go ahead and change the size to something bigger, and you can see that outline just like that. So actually, let's go ahead and set that to 10 pixels. And no matter what the size is, this will always be 10 pixels wide. So if I make this really, really small, you'll see that it's still 10 pixels wide. And of course, if I make it much bigger, you'll see that it's still 10 pixels wide. This is something you cannot do with a pixel layer. Hey, if you're still watching and feel like you're getting any useful information at all from watching this, then please do me a huge favor by liking the video. That way, more people can learn about this, and of course, you'll be helping out the channel. So the last type of layer is a smart object. A smart object acts just like a pixel layer, except it lets you do a few more things. You can convert any layer into a smart object. Let's take this pixel layer right here, right click on it and select convert to smart object. Doing that will give this layer an icon which looks something like this, which indicates it's a smart object. With a smart object, unlike a pixel layer, I can now scale this up and down with zero quality loss. And if I go ahead and scale this down and lock that in, you can see that our quality has been reduced to this. And if I zoom back out, make this large again, you can see that no quality has been lost. I can also add non-destructive adjustments and filters to the layer. So if I go up to filter and go down to blur and select Gaussian blur, and we'll just make that really high, something like that. Press OK. You can come down here and you'll see this thing called smart filters. And you'll see that Gaussian blur has been applied to that, which I can toggle on and off. And I can also edit it if I double click, and I can make some changes just like that. If we did that on a normal pixel layer, that would add the effect permanently, which would be considered destructive. Now, if you ever forget the different types of layers, don't worry, because they're actually all listed right here in your layers panel. And you can hover over each icon and that will tell you what type of layer it is. And if I click on one of these icons, such as the pixel layers, that will show me all of my pixel layers. And if I go over here, maybe select the type icon, that will show me my text layers. And you can filter through the rest of them just like so. And I can have even more filter options if I come over to this drop down button right here, and I can filter through different attributes like this. So for example, I can press name and type in the layer that I'm looking for, and that will show me the layer right here. One quick bonus tip, you can right click any layer and give it a color, and that will give it a color like so. This is good for staying organized, and also good if you plan on sharing your PSD files with people like clients and coworkers. So hopefully you now have a better understanding of how layers work at a more advanced level. There's still a few more topics we didn't cover, such as clipping masks. A clipping mask is an easy way to make an image fill up a specific space, and I can show you exactly how to do that with this video right here. But anyway, my name is Sean, and if you enjoyed or got any useful information from watching this, then make sure to hit that subscribe button for more videos just like this.